and I started finally going to a psychiatrist and psychologist, they started teaching me how to take these obsessions and channel them into productive things and not be like an unbridled horse, where you just get off on these tangents. And so, but yeah, it's a part of OCD a lot of people might not know about, how in depth it was, and I would have sometimes 2 or 3 of these fixation things going on at one time. And I didn't know when they were going to end, when they would start. It would just trigger.
This is the Knockin' Doors Down podcast. If you're looking to hear stories of hope, inspiration, and turning your greatest adversities into your advantage, well, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Jason LaChance, and through my addiction recovery and struggles with anxiety and depression, I dug into my passion of speaking with people who have transformed their lives. And my buddy Craig Stilley hanging out with me today. I mean, you are a shining example of that. I know we're going to go into so many different areas, but it's one of the beautiful things about what I do, somebody that you just make a connection with and develop a friendship. So I'm really appreciative of you being here and sharing your story and knowledge to help other people.
Appreciate you asking me on.
Absolutely. Well, man, boy, where do we start? I don't know if I want to start with childhood or some of the fun stories, because you've got so many wonderful fun stories for the people that are just listening and not watching on YouTube. I mean, you got the photos with you and Evander Holyfield, some of your boxing gloves in the background. We're going to get into all that. I think let's start with some of those struggles. I mean, early on in your childhood and some of the first precursors that you noticed with some of your mental health challenges.
Yeah. Like I said, when I was a kid, I having OCD and anxiety, different disorders. But it started out when I was a kid. The OCD part, I don't do the washing hands and all that stuff. Mine's more of the mental rituals. And so when I was a kid, I would get fixated on topics and to the extreme. It started out like normal kids having an imagination. I would go to the extreme, and I would get on these topics. I had to know everything there was about it. There, my dad was like, "You don't have an off switch." I mean, it was over the top. And then when I got in 3rd grade, it started turning into anxiety, so severe anxiety, constant anxiety, phobias, and worrying about things. I would get trichotillomania. I would pull my hair, and I pull it out. I would have all these fears of all this stuff. It was very traumatic. Nothing big happened in my life to bring it on, but it just started manifesting itself and started making bad grades, bad separation anxiety, and it got terrifying.
Yeah.
And then as I got older, it took about a year for that stuff, and it kind of went away, the bad stuff. But I still suffer from phobias and anxiety, but not that dark stuff. And until it hit me again, the fixations kept going, but it again, the bad anxiety, real bad stuff until I was 16. I had a panic attack in class, and it just came back, and I've been struggling with it since.
To help people understand the phobias you had as a child a little bit better, I mean, I know you, so I know an intelligent man. Was it you would just get, for instance, when I was a kid, I would be fascinated by sharks, so I had to read an abundance about sharks, or was it that kind of a thing? And then from there, almost like an outward fandom of it. If it was dinosaurs, then you had to have some dinosaurs and read about it,
Yeah. The fixations and stuff started like that. I would get on topics. I'd have to read everything there was about it. But then once the anxiety mixed in with it, it was the same thing, but it focused on the anxiety, became OCD. I couldn't get the fears out of my head. I obsessed on it the same way. It was, I would have phobias, not necessarily phobias, but I remember going to the show when I was a kid in 3rd grade, and I was eating some popcorn. I didn't choke, but I had a little piece in my throat. Well, I started obsessing on it so much, thinking I was going to eventually choke, that I didn't eat for a while. I mean, I would worried about eating, and this sounds kind of crazy, but if you stick your tongue in the back of your throat on the top, you feel these bumps. And I remember rubbing on my dad's face, and he had that stubble, and thinking that was going to be hair growing down in my throat, and that I was going to choke to death, and that you couldn't get out of your head,
Yeah. Was there ever any point that, I mean, well, kids, we have vivid imaginations, but this is a debilitating imagination.
Yes.
Was there certain ways you kind of started to explore it to maybe help more of a healthy processing, or was that not really the time? Because this is what, early 80s, late 70s?
Yeah, this was in 1982.
Okay.
And so, where I'm from, there wasn't, especially at the time, in mental health, they didn't have the knowledge. I mean, they had the knowledge, but not like they have now, especially the medications. And where I'm from, they didn't have the type of facility, any type of doctors around here to know to go to. Parents are not as educated now, as about mental health. So basically in third grade, I just suffered alone. My parents sent me to a pediatrician and, but they really didn't know exactly what was going on. And so it was just a very lonely suffering, and we had to answer your questions about the obsessions. I mean, I kept going on and on through my years, and it was very embarrassing because I had no confidence when I was a kid. I had this anxiety, when I was around my father, who's, very tough guy, my brother, they wasn't scared of everything. And here I was, and so I got to where I started hiding behind these kicks that we would call them and everything. And so as I got older, though, much older, when I started finally going to a psychiatrist and psychologist, they started teaching me how to take these obsessions and channel them into productive things and not be like an unbridled horse, where you just get off on these tangents. And so, but yeah, it's a part of OCD a lot of people might not know about, how in depth it was, and I would have sometimes 2 or 3 of these fixation things going on at one time. And I didn't know when they were going to end, when they would start. It would just trigger, and I would it just become this fixated, on these subjects or what have you. And then the anxiety, I thought it was separate, through my years, but they were all together, and they would make me feed off each other, because the obsession when I had the anxiety, it was so, this feeling, I couldn't get my mind off of it. And then the imagination stuff, it became, it was hard to handle, and then 16, when I've had my first panic attack, I, months after going almost a year suffering with it, I finally went and got help in 1990, started getting psychiatric help, got on medications, and, it was just, in the trial and error of medicines, and working on them, then finally got put on one, and it worked good for years, it made it go away for years.
Was there a lot of ostracizing from peers?
No, I hit it very well. I talk to my friends now that I went to school with, and they didn't even know. I was able to hide it. Now, that's what was so bad is now my parents knew about it and stuff, but I knew there was something going on. But I was a good actor. I was able to hide it, and that made it even worse because you're internalizing it, and you can't express yourself. When you're all this is going on. And so it was very, bad. It was miserable.
Yeah. Oh, it's a horrible feeling. And I'm still amazed at, that there wasn't points of, I don't know. Where was I going? I'm just surprised that possibly, addiction didn't play more in, because we try to, quiet a lot of these things. I know for me, a lot of it with the trauma and challenges that I had with anxiety and depression, it was, it became a very easy thing to continue to stay at the bottom of a bottle.
Right. Well, with me, the one good thing about anxiety was kind of governor on me is that I was scared to death to do drugs. I didn't know what it would do to me. So a lot of the fear kept me from doing it, and I never looked toward drugs as an answer. I figured, man, I'm bad enough. I am. If I do that stuff, it's going to make me get even worse. Like I'm bad enough. And I never was a big drinker. And actually, drinking had an adverse effect. It made my anxiety and stuff worse. And so, but I never was a big drinker. Then when I got on the medications, I was very responsible with them. The first one was Xanax, because the only people probably familiar with the antidepressants, but the SSRIs that were out at the time was only Prozac at that time.
Right.
And so they put me on that one on a small dose, and he put it in. But it wasn't until I got on Paxil that really did away with it, and that was in 1997. So I went, some years struggling. It put a little dent into Prozac, but not like the Paxil did, And so I never really drank on my medicines until years later. About probably 8 years ago, I started socially drinking and stuff like that, and I noticed that I started having these symptoms coming back. Until eventually it made my medicine quit working, and I didn't know at the time that alcohol makes your antidepressant quit working.
Yeah.
it counteracts it, and I didn't know that. So my medicine career, I was like, why is this coming back? And then I went through 5 years of a living nightmare after that, trying to, no medicines were working. The old medicine didn't work, switching, and it was until I finally hit another right one, but yeah, it's been a struggle.
I want to kind of jump back. You're talking about around 16 is when you started getting psychiatric help.
Right. At 16, yeah.
Yeah, I think the first time I saw anyone was maybe 18, 19. And we're pretty close in age. It wasn't really talked about then. There was almost like a stigma, like a shame onto it. I mean, was it something along with you said friends didn't know? It was not something you didn't talk about with them, let alone what about your family?
My family, I did, but I kept it secret. I didn't even think I was, going crazy. I didn't know what was going on, and it was constant. And I look back now, I don't know how I did it, but finally went to my family and I just said, look, I didn't, I don't really remember it. I kind of, blurred memory at the time, but I said, I need to, I broke down, said, I need to see somebody. I'm losing my mind, and that they finally got me, the help I needed.
Yeah.
And, it was, but like in 1990, especially back then, they still didn't have the knowledge and everything that they do now. I think it was a turning point in the 90s to where it started, coming out more, and the medications really blew up in the 90s, and the learning, about it. But yeah, it still had a stigma on it, about going to get mental health.
And don't you think, with the advocacy work you do now, so you speak with a lot of younger folks in your mentorship, there still is some of that there, but it's getting better.
It's getting better, and yeah, people don't understand it. They don't realize that the brain is an organ just like the liver or whatever, and that just like enzymes in the liver can go bad, so can neurotransmitters in the brain. And it's a lot more complex than the liver. But, people think, well, they don't understand that the brain, it does your emotions and all this stuff, and it can get sick. It can get like anything else, and it's okay to go get help. Just like, if your liver was going bad, you'd go get help with your liver, your heart. With the brain, there's help out there.
Yeah.
And, it's available. It still needs to be, there's a lot of work to be done. We need more, the brain's the last frontier. I think we're now scratching the surface. I don't really understand it, but it's okay to get help.
Yeah.
And the stigma, and that's my thing, is to try to go in and tell people, that it's okay to get help, and that you're not alone. There are people to help you. There is hope. You can get better. You can get better if you go get help and work with it and be patient and really, strive to do better. You can get better.
What were you doing? You figure teenage years, it's kind of first jobs, and then really to provide for yourself late teens, early 20s?
Well, I didn't finish high school. I quit school in 9th grade. I got my GED, but I went to work for my dad. He owned a commercial paint contracting company, and I've taken it over now, and I own it. I went to work for him, because, I couldn't sit in class. It felt like, I was claustrophobic, like everything was just caving in on me. So I eventually just couldn't sit in class, so I went to work for him, and it was a reality check, because when I went home, my dad was one of them guys. I went home and I told him, I said, I don't want to go back to school. It was in the morning. And he said, sit down. He said, sit down. And he said, most kids have their high school years and their college years to figure out what they want to do with their life. You got 30 minutes. He said, by the time I get through, by the time I get out and get through getting ready, you're going to tell me if you're going to work or going back to school. So he got ready to come in there, and he said, well, what do you want to do in your life? I said, I want to go to work. He said, go put your work clothes on. It's what you're going to do the rest of your life. And from that day on, that was my wake-up call.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, struggling with the anxiety,
sure,
and all that stuff, it was even tough, so, but I persevered, you know what I mean?
While you're checking Knockin' Doors Down out, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And if you get a lot out of this podcast, share with a friend. And don't forget the archive of interviews we have. Bam Margera, Brandon Novak, Kat Von D, Charlie Sheen, Edward Furlong, Kelly Osborne. The list goes on and on of amazing guests that have been on the podcast, sharing how they have found purposeful lives. Speaking of purpose, how about a lifestyle brand with purpose? 5150 LTM. That's right. Not only is it a lifestyle brand that can fit whatever it is you're trying to achieve in life, but they give back to the community. And you, the listener of Knockin' Doorz Down, get 20% off every time you shop at 5150 LTM. All you have to do is use the code KDD20 at checkout and get 20% off. And how does 5150 give back to the community? Portions of the sales benefit the Carlos Vieira Foundation. Their 3 amazing programs: the Race to End the Stigma, the Race for Autism, and the Race to be Drug-Free. More on the Carlos Vieira Foundation, go to carlosvieirafoundation.org. What were primary clients? Was it, like residential, business, what?
Well, we did residential and commercial. Then,
Okay.
Years later, we just went straight into commercial. I just do schools and stuff like that, major commercial jobs.
Sure. I was curious because I was wondering then what kind of interaction you had with other folks through work. I mean, was it primarily you, Dad, hired hands?
Yeah, we have workers, we have pretty big crews and do jobs. So, I check the jobs and stuff like that, run them, but it gives me time. I talk to people, when I come across a lot of people that I get them help, that are on jobs and everything, and talk to them. And, whether it be alcohol or whatever kind of problem they're having, I try to get them help and stuff like that, with the jobs. Yeah. So, I try to do what I can there too.
It's really interesting how our lives can play out, and then what our disadvantages at one point become our advantages. I mean,
exactly.
You're so articulate and with such wonderful energy, and I wish I could share with the audience some of our wonderful conversations that we've had. But I'm very fascinated by how that played out to be for you.
Yeah, at 16, that's when I got into boxing. Is that I was looking for something to get my mind off of what I was going through. So there was no boxing in my area at the time, and so a friend of mine, his daddy had been a professional fighter. He had lots of professional fights, so he had trained him, and he started teaching me. And then I started doing backyard fights because there was no gyms around. That there was, but I could never find this guy. It ends up how things play out, but I started doing backyard fights, fighting guys from schools and other schools and everything. And my name started getting around. And my teacher, one time, he told me, I never put 2 and 2 together about Dick Menchaca. You can look him up on Wikipedia. He's a pretty good legend guy from our area. And so, but I couldn't find him. He was like 72 years old at the time. And my teacher, I didn't know that was his uncle. And so he told me, I thought I was in trouble. He pulled me to the side and said, this is where I quit school. And he said, have you, because, we've been hearing about this boxing you've been doing. Why don't you turn it into a sport? And I said, man, I look high and low. I can't find a gym. He goes, well, have you ever heard of Dick Menchaca? And I said, well, yeah, but I can't find him. He goes, well, he's my uncle. I've called and talked to him, and he said you could go to the gym. He just works for pros. So I went down there, and the rest is history. I started training there, and we got very close, me and his family, and it took off. And I ended up leaving there, and I was able to be trained under Kenny Weldon, a very good trainer. Yeah. And it's funny how things play out, where I eventually, the rest of the story with, who I know and everything. It's kind of neat,
well, we're going to get into that. We're going to get there. Okay. But I got to ask you, with your OCD, was this a part of that first really channeling it in a positive way? Because I could see that, the way your brain works, it becoming a really powerful thing, because with, maybe people that haven't trained in any kind of a martial art, which I do put boxing in that realm. A lot of people don't, but I do. Did it really help with it kind of going from, a practice to when you get in the ring with someone else, this stuff just has to be second nature. You have to know when you need to slip the jab, and, if this guy drops his right shoulder, that's when you need to go in with a hook and all these things. Did you find it really started to help you?
See, I didn't have the training like that to do, like you're saying. So it started out, I had a heavy bag in my backyard. My buddy come over and I would hit this heavy bag for hours. It was something to, and what's funny about it, I always kept thinking it's going to be a kick like the rest of them. I'm going to lose interest, but I've never, it's been 30 something years and I haven't lost interest since. I fell in love with it. And so I would hit the heavy bag. I remember in school, I couldn't even hold a pencil. My hands would hurt me so bad. I would sit out there for hours. and this energy releases energy. It gave me something to focus on rather than that, and it's something and learning it. And so, would watch the old fights on TV, and I would take notes, and I would practice until I got with Dick Menchaca. And he started teaching me a lot more, and I started sparring with his pros and everything, and he didn't really work with amateurs that much, just the pros. So I sparred with them and sort of learning a whole bunch, and then when I got with Kenny Weldon, that's when I really learned a whole bunch, Yeah. And so to answer your question about, the dodging and stuff is that, and what's funny is that it taught me how to learn about overcoming fear, because when you get in the boxing ring, you're there's a lot of fear, it's a lot of emotion. So it taught me how to try to, control emotions and everything. And so I love the sport.
I could only imagine. I mean, the farthest I've gone with anything is just what we call rolling in Brazilian jiu-jitsu, that form of sparring. Mm-hmm. But I do a lot of ring announcing for MMA, and I have done boxing mm-hmm. and pro wrestling. But really, mm-hmm. when you stand across from another opponent, the goal is for them to beat you. We know how. Yeah. I couldn't imagine, really having to shut down a lot of those things. I mean, you really were, I don't know if gifted into something or how you want to put it, but to really face a lot of those challenges that take place up in our mind.
Well, you think as much as you can, but in boxing, they're the same. If you think that if you're waiting to throw to see an opening, it's too late to throw the punch. Everything has to be reactive. You have to do it over and over and over so many times, like learning how to ride a bike. It's got everything's reaction in boxing. So, you try to just react, and, you're trying to keep your mind. You got to focus and watch everything, because the punch that you don't see is the one that knocks you out. And so you try to stay focused, and everything, and clear your mind. So in boxing, when I was actually, boxing, that's when my mind was really, it's hard. It's just when it really didn't have the anxiety and everything, because you have to be so focused on what's going on. I had kind of some relief, at the time. And I know it sounds crazy getting hit, because I tell people, they're like, they watch, boxers do it or whatever, and they don't think it hurts. But I'm like, imagine running or exercise and you're trying to stop and take a breath, and a guy's trying to take your head off at the same time. You're trying to fight him off. It's more mental than what you really imagine.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And the best, I guess, experience I can equate while you were talking about that, Craig, is when I go like go-kart racing or something. I'm sitting there talking with myself and reminding myself, you got to look into the turn and start the turn before the turn's coming up. And, if you want to overtake this guy, you got, and it really is those things where we get like nothing else is going to come into your head. It can't. Because if you start thinking, did I leave the oven on? All of a sudden comes that punch you didn't see.
Right. Yeah. You got to stay pretty focused, and you're just, like I say, you got to react. You can think, about how to set a guy up and stuff like that, but there's not much time of, especially that's why you have to spar so much and do it over and over, so it becomes repetitious and, and doing it. And, then later on, I got to my passion, I got to training fighters. And that's what I really loved was when I became a trainer, and training fighters and everything. That became my passion after that.
Yeah. I want to dig into that here in a second, but I thought that crossed my mind is working with some newcomers in recovery, and they get the fear of, I kind of suck at this. And it's like, you're going to suck at anything new, mm-hmm. It's new to you, right. And you might be more inclined in some areas or whatever it is, but how do you really encourage that, stepping into the uncomfortable, stepping into the new?
Well, you talking about as far as training them?
Training life. I know that you have young folks that reach out to you, and after you share your story, and
yeah, I mean, like I tell them when they come in the ring, I would never look at what a person looked like, because it doesn't matter what a guy looks like. People think you got to be big and tough, and it's hard. It's what you got. I look for determination and willpower, and so we, always had them doing line work, practicing their movement and the rhythm and all this stuff. And when I was moving away from them, I'd watch the ones and they'd be talking or they'd kind of cut the corner, not take it serious, but I'd watch the ones that are by themselves going up and down that line doing it. And it would show me they had willpower, because that's something that's very unique when a fighter comes there and, you don't want them to quit. That's everything is persistence. So I would take that kid and I'd build their confidence up, and encourage them, teach them about fear and emotions and everything. And I would, because if you overload them and stuff, if you throw them in the ring, a lot of guys just say, well, let's see how tough they are. I never believed in that because, if you can put a spark out pretty quick like that, is put them in there and gradually build them up and give them confidence and encourage them. And I didn't care if I made a champion or not. I was fortunate if I had, amateur champions and stuff like that. And I ended up, training guys to become champion. But I didn't look at it like that. My thing was I would tell them every time after the first 5 fights, because your first 5 fights, even more, they're very tough, because you're getting in the ring, you don't know what to expect. And I would tell them, it doesn't matter what the judges think because, it's their opinion or how they count the punches. And I said, the crowd, 99.9% of them don't have the fortitude to get in this ring. And I said, don't worry what I think because you're a winner to me anyway. I said, the main thing is to do your best. Go out there and just do the best you can. And don't give in to fear and don't give in that and just do the best you can and you're a winner. It doesn't matter.
And that's such a challenge. Why I love competitive sports and is what you iterated there is that, a lot of society sometimes they're going to sit and they're going to say things and they're going to judge. And like you pointed out in so many situations, when I'm at sporting events, I can't stand when someone, you suck. And it's like, here you are, your 4th beer in, dude. You clearly don't care about your diet, your second thing of nachos, and you're sitting here slamming a guy that has an off night who's dedicated 100,000 hours towards this sport. It's kind of like, but it's hard to not let that in. I mean, just our brains naturally gravitate towards danger to alert us. So thus, we can hear the negative. You can have 999 people cheer for you, but you can end up focusing on that one person that boos,
Yeah.
Knockin' Doors Down by Carlos Vieira. Now available wherever you get audiobooks.
I wasn't done partying, and I didn't want the binge to end. I think I knew that when I finally got home, I'd have to face what I had done, and I wasn't ready to do that. Being responsible for my actions wasn't something I was looking forward to. I had abandoned my wife and baby, my family, and my business. I wanted to avoid the shame of returning to what I had left behind. Even though I was not yet going home, I wasn't sure I had enough resources to continue the binge.
Click the link in the podcast description to find out more.
And that's what I love about boxing, and I could relate to it because going through what I went through, I was alone. It was just me, and so, and we all do that and we struggle, but I could relate to boxing because boxing, in that middle range, your corner, you don't have and I know football, but you don't have a lineman blocking for you or the receiver to make the catch, and all that stuff. It's just you, and then the spotlight's on you. And so it was, I can relate to it, that it's you kind of basically against you, even though you have an opponent there. And so it was a very lonely time when the bell rang because, it's just you and him. There's nobody there except for the referee, whatever. And that's what it is. And so I could really relate to it. And so I related it to life because I look at life like being in a boxing ring, is you have all the emotions pretty much in the fight that you're going to have in life. You're going to have fear, you're going to have tire, you're going to have discouragement, you're going to have, loss of, so all these things you have to battle, while you're in the ring. And so it teaches you a lot of discipline and, you can't quit,
Yeah. Because you kind of give up and there's slightly, here comes that punch you didn't see.
Yeah. And it shows what a person is, because when you get hit, sometimes, it stuns you're not really thinking. And so it shows what you really have on the inside because that's when, the not quitting comes in. You have some people that just, and boxing's not for everybody. Some people just, they quit, they don't want to do it. Then you have some people just try to survive. And you have some that try to overcome, and really try to strive to win it. And that's that's a rare deal. But that's what I learned, because that's the way I looked at life is that you can't quit, and there's only keep going forward and keep striving.
Yeah, and I think that so many things and why, it's so good for young people to be involved in something, especially if they have a good mentor. And while we're talking, I'm thinking of the Mickey voice, down it, Rocco, keep fighting this guy hard,
Yeah.
But we all need that because we can get those negative voices planted in our heads really young, and we can say some really mean things to ourselves. And it's generally not originally in our voice. We just buy into the bull. So it's really great that, you've done that you've, like I said, taken what you've been through and passed it along.
And that's what I love. Sometimes I'm at the store and I have kids that I trained 15 years ago come up to me, and I don't really remember some because I've grown up, and they tell me how they've been successful in life and that how I made an impact, and that means everything to me. Yeah. Is, even if they didn't go on to do whatever, it's, it helped them in life, that they say, man, it built up my confidence. It taught me when I watch them, how they excel at their jobs and everything. It's, it just makes everything worthwhile.
Yeah. Well, and you've got so many wonderful things that are going to be coming to fruition. Your book, the film, but I think such a wonderful part and story that you shared with me, because you and I were talking about faith as I've dug into mine more and more in my my sobriety. But I just love how Evander Holyfield played a role in that. It
played a massive role,
and then became a friend.
He's like my brother now, he's, it's amazing, because Evander, even when it wasn't in the boxing in 1984, when I watched him in the Olympics, that there was something about Evander that just caught my eye. And even, I wasn't a big boxing enthusiast at the time, I would always watch Evander. It was just something about the guy when I watched him, as cruiserweight and fighting and all that stuff, and then moving to the heavyweight. And so, when he went to fight Tyson, he looked like he'd been fighting too many wars, at the time. He wasn't really looking good. And Tyson gets out of prison, he's knocking everybody's running lights out, and they match him up. And, I always heard Evander talk about the Lord, and I was like, hey, that's all right. I love the boxing part, and he would always give glory to the Lord. And so they match him up. Tyson's sitting there, and, everybody, the whole world thought he was pretty much going to lose, I think, except maybe Ron Borges with the media, gave it to him. But very few, maybe Teddy Atlas or something, but probably had him, a big underdog. And I thought he was going to lose. I was like, man, what are you doing? Just get out of boxing. And he was, he's sitting up there at the press conference, and he says, humbly, he said, I'm going to win. He said, I have the Holy Spirit. And he said, I'm going to win my knockout. I said, man, this guy's then got fanatical, punchy or something. What? Yeah. And so I had a going away party for him. And I watched every one of his fights. And so at this time I'm into boxing, at this time I'm training fighters, and he's been my idol. When I really got into boxing, Evander was my idol. And so as I'm watching this fight, I got out my friends, I was kind of went through a hoodlum stage and everything. I didn't have no direction. And so I heard him say that. And when he's, long story short, when he's fighting the fight, he ends up, as I'm watching this thing, it's no longer a fight. It's something spiritually drawing me. And I know it sounds weird to fight, but I was picturing the whole world saying this guy's going to lose, and here's Mike Tyson up there, and Evander's handling him. Tyson starts looking to try to quit. He ended up knocking him out. And this whole fight, something's drawing me in my spirit. Then after the fight, when Freddie Pacheco, the fight commentator, got on there, and he says, Evander, how did you pull off this miraculous upset? He said, I'm led by the Spirit of God. Whatever God wants me to do. He says, well, let's get off God. Let's get back to boxing. Hopefully God's here for everybody. How did you do this? And he kind of grinned at him. He said, because I'm led by the Spirit of God. He said, I'm washed up. But with Jesus Christ, I'm not washed up. And something said, I want what that guy's got.
Yeah.
Not the boxing part, but I said, I want that. Where, because I always felt like the whole world, this anxiety stuff won't leave me alone, and what am I going to do? And I said, I want that. And so I ended up, something was telling me, go upstairs. And I had a Bible upstairs, it had dust on it. And I went up there and said, we started reading it. Well, I read it. I didn't understand it, and the next day the Lord put the perfect person in front of me. My dad was working for my dad, and we were doing these housing authorities, in the bad part of town. And there was a laborer guy out there. He was in his 40s. I was 22. And he looked mean, boy. He had a mustache and beard. This guy was built, and he had been in the penitentiary, for gangs and stuff, but he had been a minister for 10 years. So I didn't know who to talk to. So I said, and his name was Johnny. I said, Johnny, come here. And I told him what happened. He said, God's calling on him. I said, what do you mean? He said, he's using Evander Holyfield to draw you to him. I said, what do I do? He said, pray. Just talk to God like you're talking to me. And so, long story short, nothing was happening. I prayed, and eventually, turned my life to the Lord. One night when I was praying, a big transformation experience happened. And so for 5 years after that, people would tell me, "You're the right Evander," and tell him this. I said, "Man, this stuff's going to get lost in fan mail. I'll get a picture with an autograph, whatever." Well, Kenny Weldon, that trained me, we were at a Kinder, Louisiana, at a casino where I was corner fights, an amateur deal. He was there, and he never knew this. So he just come up to me one time and said, "Do you want to meet Evander Holyfield? I'm training him in Houston for the John Maurice fight." And I was like, "Are you serious, man?" He was like, "Yeah." I said, so I told him, he goes, "Man, someone just told me to ask you." So I went there, and when I was sitting there, I was, training nighttime in Houston, and I drive a couple hours there, and I see this white flatbed truck pull up, and I see this guy get out. It's Tim Hallmark. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he trained tons of champions. He was a sports and strength and conditioning coach that trains a lot of champions and a wide variety of athletes. I mean, he's just remarkable. And he was a very Christian guy and very approachable. So I'm telling you, so we're walking up there, and he's shaking his head. He's like, "I got to tell Holy this, man. I got to tell Holy." So he comes there, he puts, Evander trains, and at the end of it, he's sitting in the ring, and we have a group prayer before, and I'm in all looking like, "Oh my God, there's this guy that I've been idolizing to save my soul." And so he gets in there, he's pointing at me, and he's telling Evander, and Evander's looking at me, and he comes up to me, and Tim says, "Go in the ring, and I want you to tell Evander everything that you told me." I said, "Okay." So I go in there, and Evander's looking up at me, man. I'm just telling him everything, really in depth. And we start talking. And so I went, 2 or 3 other times and stuff. And, I ended up drifting off, from seeing him and everything. And I went to Bible college, and eventually I started drifting away. My doctor changed my medicine. This was in 2004. And then I had a panic attack one night. I thought the OCD thought come in my head and said, "God's turned his back on you. You blaspheme." So I ran from God for like 18 years, until I started getting something sort of drawing me back with him when I said, when I went through this bad time 8 years ago, when I had 5 years of this horrible experience, when I come out of it, I said, I want to do something to tell my life story of what I've been through. And I want to try to help people. I want to encourage them, and I want to bring attention. And something was really telling me to do that. And so it sort of drawn me back to God, because I felt that he was really pushing me. I could feel it. And as I got closer to him, I started getting closer, and finally I turned my life back to him. And so I started trying to do my film. And so I made a sizzle and everything, and everybody was liking it. And I went to a film festival in Las Vegas, and I didn't want to get mixed up in that kind of crowd, and everything. Cause I thought, man, the odds of me getting this thing done, but I knew that God was behind it. I had no doubt in my mind, and I don't quit. But I finally sat down. I said, "God, what do you want me to do?" I finally just asked him, "What do you want me to do?" And he said the craziest thing in the world to me, man. He said, and I haven't even thought about him in years. He said, "Get hold of Evander Holyfield." I mean, it was very odd. I mean, he didn't speak to me audibly, but very much in my head, that's what he told me. And I was thinking, I thought out loud, what? That's the craziest thing I ever heard. Get hold of Evander Holyfield. Then I said, how am I supposed to do that? I don't even know where this guy is. Kenny Weldon passed away, unfortunately. And then the next thing he told me was get hold of Tim Hallmark. And I thought it was the craziest thing again, like, well, I don't even know how to. So I was going to do what he said. So I found Tim Hallmark's website, and I had a little picture of me, him and Evander from 18 years prior, and I wrote a little deal and sent it to him thinking I'm going to look like an idiot. And he messages me. And so he says, "This is Tim Hallmark." And I said, "That really Tim Hallmark?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "Oh, you bet your butt it is." So he ends up asking me if he could call me. So the next day we're talking. And so, he starts helping me very much spiritually. He's become my spiritual mentor, and so he's helping me. And he says, "I want to give you Evander's email address. You email him this." So we had been talking, a couple of months went by, and he calls me one day and he says, "Craig, I haven't spoken to Evander in a while, like, 6 or 7 months." He said, "And I've never done this before in my life, giving out a client's number." He said, "When I prayed about it, I want to give you Evander's cell phone number." I said, "This guy's going to think I'm crazy, Tim. I mean, you give me a 6. I say, "How did you get my number?" He said, "Man, you got to trust me. You got to trust God." So I prayed, and I called him. I don't remember the conversation, but we hit it off, and here we are now 3 years later, and best of friends, and I help him assist, in certain things. And, we talk almost daily. He's, a spiritual mentor to me too. We're very close.
It's, I love that story. Thank you for sharing that. It's really interesting, I think, sometimes, and I don't know if you've reflected on it this way. And I guess I just look at it as my journey of faith, and whatever pathway someone takes is, and I've had a similar experience where I drifted away,
Mhm.
and I wonder if I look back that was the way that it was supposed to be, because it allowed me then to acquire that much more knowledge through my good experiences and my very negative experiences to then help people even more. Have you ever looked back upon it that way?
Yeah, because when I thought I blasted him, I ran from him, because I was scared. And so when Tim told me, I was sudden, because when I had when the Lord come to that night when I got saved, I remember it very vividly. Is that because nothing was happening. I remember looking up and I was doing like Johnny said, pray, and nothing. And I go tell him, he'd say, man, you just keep talking to God. He'd smile at me and say, you just keep praying to God. Talk to him just like you're talking to me. You don't have to say no special thing. Just if you doubt him, tell him. And so every night I did that, man, and nothing happened. He just keep encouraging me. And then 2 months today, when I did that, I felt, and I'm not a hocus pocus guy. I'm not that kind of person. But I'm telling you, when I was in that room praying, something I felt a presence in that room, man. And it spoke to me, not audibly, but it asked me, it was a voice in my head asked and said, "Are you ready to make a commitment?" And I remember thinking, "This is it, man. This is it." And then the next thing it said, "You will sin and fall, but will you continue to get up and follow me, Jesus Christ?" And I thought about it, very, very hard. And I said, yes. And the feeling to this day come over me, I can't explain. But so Tim told me later on, when I thought I did that, he says, what did Jesus say to you, man? He said, "You will sin and fall." He said he knew what you would do. He didn't say, "Will you make a commitment that you'll be perfect for forever?" He didn't say that. He said, "You will sin and fall, but will you continue to get up and follow me, Jesus Christ?" That's what you committed to. And when he said that, a light switch went off, and I was like, "You're right," And so, he knows we're going to do that, he knows everything. And so, and it has made me closer. The drifting away, it's made me where I don't want to go back. Drifted away again, so it's made my faith stronger, and it's made me to where I don't want to drift away. But it's made me, it's taught me quite a bit. So to answer your question, yes, I think sometimes, I don't think he wants us to, but he knows we're going to do it. He says all things work together for the good to those who are called according to my purpose. So I believe even though we do it, he'll make the good out of it when we come back.
And I think that testing thereof is, like you said, it brings so much more value. People like newcomers, I'll tell some of my war stories, some of my worst actions in my addiction. And they're like, "Gosh, you're so vivid with it." I'm like, I keep that close because it reminds me not to go back to where I was.
Exactly.
I have no desire to suffer in that way ever again. Yeah, it's like I'm no good to anybody in that space. And
it's like that, the 5 years when I was doing bad, I wish I would have had the Lord with me. But through that, I can kind of see, you kind of see how he sets the stage for everything. I wouldn't be where I am now with everything I'm doing if I didn't go through that.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't be getting my film done. I wouldn't be writing, having doing my book. I wouldn't be helping people if I didn't go through that, And so I look back and I don't think he wants that. It didn't happen, but some things he allows, I think, to bring about his purpose,
Absolutely. Well, and it's like you said, you've had so many different doors open to you. I mean, of people that you've then offered to go and help, and now it's coming back to, folks helping you.
Oh man. And the way, when I did what he said for me to do, man, the people that I know now and the things that I'm able to do, and I don't do it to toot my horn, because I try to tell people when they ask me, "How do you know all these people and do this?" I say, because God, man, it's nothing that I did myself. I couldn't do it on my own. And I said, but he'll do the same thing for you. Maybe not what I'm doing, but he'll do the same thing for you, and whatever your dreams are and whatever you desire to do, he'll do the same if you put him first. Because, I'm not perfect by no means of the imagination. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I am. I mean, I mess up daily, but I have some, that forgives me, and I try my best to do the right thing. But my thing is, is that's who I'm looking for, and that's who I tell him. I'm like, man, there's nothing I did. I simply just asked him what to do, and I followed what he said. And what he's done for me in the last 2.5 years, I couldn't. There's no way I could do that on my own. Absolutely no way. People try to they try to get your pride there because, man, you need to give yourself more credit. I'm like, I'm going to work hard I'm a hard worker. I'm going to work hard in anything I ever do. I said, but I can't make things happen. I cannot make them things happen, especially the doors he's opened up for me. And like I say, the people and the connections that I have and the stuff I'm doing, there's no way in a million years, and it goes deeper than this. We don't have the time to talk, but you know a lot of it, but there's no way I can do that on my own.
Yeah. Well, one of the things when we were having I don't remember how long we were on the phone, hour and a half. I don't know. And I brought up to you my love of boxing and combat sports in general, but and you didn't know this, and I want to share this. I want to share this story again, not to toot your horn or mine in any way, but that power of how things come together. God, I should pull up the text message and read it because I've got my phone here in front of me. I don't think you do. But we were having that conversation and I was talking about, with boxing, one of my favorite boxers of all time is Sugar Ray Leonard. And it wasn't just because of his work in the ring. It was because when I heard a man that I had an admiration for admit that he had went through sexual abuse and that was a part of his addiction, and how much that meant to someone like myself that went through it as a child, and that a man, feeling a little emotional about it, that I just admired was that open and honest about it. And it was such a beautiful thing. And you were like, yeah, I had an experience with Ray.
Yeah. Me and Ray, we've gotten friends, and I met him. We were at Mark Wahlberg's celebrity event, and we got to talking and we hit it off. He told me the experience, so we exchanged numbers and we got to be friends, and message and everything. And Ray's a good guy. So, and I told you, I said, well, man, I know Ray. I said, I'll tell him about you. I messaged him, and you probably thought I was full of bull, but I said, well, as soon as we get off the phone, I'll message him and tell him about you, and so it was real nice what he did back.
Yeah. I hope he doesn't mind me sharing it. I don't think he would because he's such a beautiful person.
I don't believe it.
Tell Jason that it was an automatic message to him from God and continue to inspire as he's showing it now. I'm in your corner. Boxing glove, heart, boxing glove, sugar.
Yeah.
It had been a while since I had cried, like in a good way. It was so moving.
And I loved it, man. Because as soon as he sent it to me, to send to you, I had to screenshot it and send it to you, man. It made me feel so good, that you were able to see that.
Yeah.
And when you said how much it touched, it really made me feel good.
And I hope that, him knowing that sharing his story helps so many people like myself. And I'm sure he has an understanding of that.
Yeah, I was a guest speaker at a big recovery center by Corpus Christi, and there was a man there that was recovering from drugs, and he had been molested. And so I felt in my heart to bring it up about Ray, because he loved Sugar Ray Leonard, and he didn't know that. And so when I said that about, Ray doing that, because Ray told me this public information, and I know that Ray tries to help people, and because we've talked, for a lot of time. And so I brought it up and I told him, when I was telling everybody, I brought that up and some other things about how the Lord put that together, me and Ray. And so when I got through speaking, he came up to me and he said how much that really touched him. He didn't know that about Sugar, and that was his favorite boxer. And it's kind of funny, just how the Lord works. So I was able, and it don't matter because touching you and touching others, like that, you don't know how them people end up helping other people. It's a chain reaction.
Absolutely.
And so, when I was on the bus with him, we were coming back from this thing, and this guy wanted to talk to Evander, and he said, you mind if I talk to you? And I said, hey, man, go do a talk to your off, So I was sitting up there with Ray, and we'd been talking, eating dinner together and everything, and we struck up a conversation. He was telling me about some personal things about him, and I revealed, about some very personal things about me, and we just clicked, and it's funny because how God, the chances of me and him being put right there together and how we struck, I don't even know how I still try to remember how the conversation even come up, and I can't remember. But to get it in depth like that, that it was, again, that how I helped you and through telling Ray's story and, sending a message straight from Ray, to you. It's just, it's amazing how things work.
Life is weird that way.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's just, I don't think it's weird, man. I think, things just, God's got his purpose, in doing things. And that's what I like doing now, man. I like going out and telling people my story. And I don't preach to anybody. I don't tell anybody what they should believe or nothing like that. I just simply tell them my story, of what's happened with me, and you can't make the stuff up, that's happened. And so it's just remarkable. And I love seeing people. I've touched so many people, not because of anything I do, but because of what the Lord's done. It's touched so many people that I tell my testimony and everything to, and it's reached so many people, man. It just keeps on and on and on. And, just they find it fascinating about me and Evander's story, because I really go in more in depth about things, and, it's really touched them.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Do we have an ETA on the book, the film, and the other projects you're working on?
Well, man, the book, it's in the process of being written. It's a process, writing everything and getting it all put together in the film. I have a producer, that's we've already signed and things like that. I'm looking for the financing. That's going to be, the film is going to be, it's people think it's a boxing show. It's not going to be a boxing show. It's going to have boxing in it as a background, but it's not going to be a boxing show, which is a very good show. But it's a segment of based on my life, but it's not my life story. It's a segment of a part of my life. Now, my book is going to be my biography, my autobiography that I'm getting done. But I have other films I want to do in books also. But these are the ones that I want to do right now, because I think it's, to help people, and by giving them encouragement and everything. Yeah, so the ETA, it's going to be, it don't happen overnight. There's a lot of, the book's going to be a lot, it's not as hard, to get that done. I just got to get it written. But, the film, there's a lot of working parts. So especially right now with the strike that's going on, in LA with the writers and all that kind of stuff, it's kind of put a little slowdown on, but it's also giving me time to, try to get my investors. And that's really what I'm looking for, investors to want to invest in it.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to put some links in the description here. If you guys want to keep in touch with Craig, reach out to him. I mean, despite him looking like a really tough guy, you're a sweet man, and you're here to help. So please don't hesitate to reach out. You just trust me. He's a brilliant man, and with a huge heart. But Craig, we're going to do some fun stuff now. All right, some random questions. Are you ready?
I'm ready, buddy.
Top 3 boxing movies. Your 3 favorite.
Well, of course, Rocky. It's going to be some of the Rockies, and I love the fighter because I know Mickey Ward, and I've had the honor of meeting Mark Wahlberg, and I'll be around him again. So I love the fighter, and then I like the one with about James Braddock, Cinderella Man.
Oh yeah,
I like Cinderella Man. I really like that story. So it would be those three movies about the fighters. Yeah.
All good ones. All good ones. First time I've asked someone about boxing movies and they didn't throw Raging Bull in there. And I'm like, I like Raging Bull, but it's a little further down the way for me too. So
yeah.
What are you gonna do?
Jake LaMotta.
Yeah. Pet peeves. What irks you? What just annoys you?
Hypocrites. I don't like people that judge other people and do the same thing, and they're very judgmental. I don't like hypocrisy, and I don't like I don't like bullies. Yeah. That's I know that's nobody does, but one of my pet peeves, I just don't like hypocrites, man. I don't like people that put down other people and stuff like that, and to do whatever, and they're doing the same thing. That's one of my pet peeves.
Yeah, drives me absolutely bananas too.
Yeah.
If you could have dinner with any one person, living or not, who would it be and why?
Man, I think it'd be Denzel Washington, man. Because people always say, "What about Jesus?" I eat with Jesus all the time. He's alive, and I'm with him all the time. But I would Denzel Washington, because I love Denzel. I think he's one of my favorite actors, and not to mention he's a Christian guy, and he's very wise. and I think he'd be a great guy to talk to about the film industry and also just to sit down. I'd love just to sit down and talk with him about, faith and just to talk to him. I think he's just a great guy.
Yeah.
And I've heard a lot of good things about him.
Oh, agreed.
Yeah.
Best piece of advice you've ever received?
The best advice I ever received was to talk to God. When Johnny kept telling me, you just pray and talk to God. That's probably the best advice, or it changed my life. When he kept telling me, and he would keep encouraging me, saying, you just keep praying and keep talking to God. It's probably the best advice I've ever received.
Worst advice you ever received?
Worst advice I've ever received was, oh man, there's so much worse. They say the worst advice is advice. The worst advice I've ever received, if it feels good, do it. I'd probably say, if it feels good, do it. It gets you in a lot of trouble.
I've never thought of that, and yes, it does, Craig. I'm a living testimony to that. One of my mottos is doing the right thing doesn't and most often will not feel good, and doing the wrong thing often feels good in the moment. Well,
right, and a lot of times it gets you in a lot of trouble. So yeah.
Last random question. What does success look like to you?
Well, success is I think it's like the beauty's in the eye of the beholder. It's what you consider success. Some people, think success is, to me, success is when a kid comes up to me in the store and tells me, you helped me in my life. Now my confidence, I believe I can do what I want to do. And that to me is a success. When I talk to somebody, in private and, help them when they're having anxiety and, they call me at 2:00 in the morning or what have you, and I can talk them through it and give them hope. That's success. But I want to be great. And I think success can sometimes be about just you. Being great is when you can achieve what you want to do, but help other people. And so I want to be great, because I don't want it just to be about me. But again, to answer your question, success is to me is helping other people, and doing that. That to me is success.
Yeah. Well, Craig, this is a time I like to leave the guests. Well, you have the floor to close us out. If there's anything you want to lend to someone who's struggling, or maybe they have a loved one who is, what might you say to them?
It depends on the struggling, but I always tell people there's hope, that, don't ever give up, don't quit. What I love what Evander said one time is, when I was sitting there talking to him, I said, Evander, what was it like when you lost your first fight? He said, I ain't never lost. I don't lose. I was like, well, yeah. He goes, no, man, you lose and you quit. He said, I just don't get the decision sometimes, and so my thing I tell people is don't quit. There's to keep on going. There's always help, because I felt the same way when the medicine wouldn't work and I was going to this stuff, and, it got very, gloomy because I was losing hope, but I kept on striving. I wouldn't quit. And I finally got the help I needed, got the medication, and here I go, and so don't quit, keep on going. There's always help out there. There's always a way, and just don't give up. Don't give up, and I tell them, I don't ever try to tell anybody, what they should believe. I hope that what I think is better well done than well said. And so I try to let my life, if they ask me my thing, I tell them, but my whole thing, man, is that there's hope out there. Friedrich Nietzsche said, hope is a better stimulant for life than happiness will ever be. And so, hope is a big thing, and don't give up hope and don't quit. With anything you do, is keep, if it looks doomy, get help, and it's available. And it'll work out. Everything always ends up getting better.
This is the Knockin' Doors Down podcast, featuring celebrities, experts, and everyday people who have overcome adversities, including addiction, mental health, and trauma, to live purposeful lives. And that's what Knockin' Doors Down is all about.